Black Mesa can eat my bankrupt...
Sir, the testing?
Right.
It's always really interesting when two different game series end up being connected when on the surface it doesn't look like there's any relation. This usually can be done in several different ways. Either different game series exist within the same world, or sometimes things are a little bit more abstract and the games exist in the same multiverse when the games actually choose to write in a multiple universe storyline. And sure, we see crossovers happen in games all the time, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about series that, as far as lore and story are concerned, are connected, even if on the surface it doesn't look like there's any connection. Now, a lot of these can get really confusing, so a great place to start is something a little more simple before we go full like rabbit hole deep diving, and let's look at the Doom series. But all the way back in the 90s, Doom had left many hints along the way that it might be connected to a larger universe linking multiple other games into its timeline. The biggest game being connected to Doom potentially, Wolfenstein, which already had a similar playstyle and both were first-person shooter games developed under id Software. Throughout many of the old Doom games, there were a lot of nods to the Wolfenstein series, but it really came into fruition where this theory had something to go off of when Doom 2 RPG released, giving a name to our Doom guy in at least Doom 2 RPG, Stan Blazkowicz, who apparently is a descendant of the BJ Blazkowicz from those old Wolfenstein games. This is just one example of the character showing up, but this timeline ended up spreading a bit further when Commander Keen ended up showing up as an ally spy in Castle Wolfenstein that helps Blazkowicz. This became kind of this inside joke and reference, obviously, to the Commander Keen games, but then fans started wondering, well, like, what if BJ Blazkowicz's grandson, Billy Blaze, took on the name Commander Keen as an homage to this real commander? And then this led to a lot of speculation of other id Software games, like Quake, for example. Are these also a part of a shared universe? I mean, these are the days before multiverses became like a very common plot point or thread. It was just like little Easter eggs that fans would run with. And even when it comes to games like Doom and Wolfenstein potentially being connected, it's always just a little weird how you start to think there's maybe a small connection and then things go way deeper than what you expect. And that's kind of how a lot of these other games that have shared universes that on the surface you might not have realized, because like there's some lore where you got to get your tinfoil hat on and you got to get ready to just like go deep, because it gets kind of crazy. But what I love about this one from the 90s is that when a lot of these games would later get rebooted in one way or another, while it could have been a turning point or a new starting point for lore, once again, it was established that the characters exist in at least some sort of either shared timeline or shared multiverse. If I understand things correctly, the newer Doom games are technically still a part of the main Doom timeline, but also to an extent in Wolfenstein, there are enough references to things that happen in Doom and plot points that are relevant way down the road in the Doom universe that at the very least is an homage to the original connected universe that id Software had set up so many years ago. Even more so when Quake Champions came out, they introduced characters from other id Software games using the very simple, oh, this is a universe where we can pull characters from other universes into this like multiverse stage arena to fight it out. I mean, nowadays the newer Wolfenstein games are very vague in how the timeline works. Like, we still don't know if that Activision Wolfenstein game is a part of the same canon as the main Wolfenstein game, but we can always rest assured that there will always be connections made between the Doom games and the Wolfenstein games, and sometimes some random other id Software games while we're at it. Grand Theft Auto is an interesting one because at first I thought its timeline was really straightforward. I thought all the 3D games are connected, but no. It gets weird, once again, like a lot of these connected universes, but it does play a role into potentially the larger Rockstar universe, so we really do want to take a deeper look at it. For the most part, with Grand Theft Auto 5, it's safe to assume that other Grand Theft Auto games exist in the same universe here. We know Grand Theft Auto 4 gets a pass because there's references to GTA 4 in GTA 5, and characters from GTA 4's standalone DLC show up. Areas from the game San Andreas return along with a little Easter egg referencing CJ, so we can assume San Andreas is also a part of the universe. If you want to count that, there has been some talks from Rockstar specifically saying that the HD universe, which is GTA 4 and GTA 5, are kind of in their own canon with GTA Online, and then the older 3D games are their own canon, and then the 2D games are their own canon. But essentially that statement was more in response to how to handle GTA 1 and 2, which were very much out there story-wise, especially GTA 2. Whereas for the most part, everything in the 3D universe, along with the references the HD games make to the other 3D games, but nonetheless, as it stands, it seems like the HD games stand alone as their own universe universe, and the rest of the GTA games are no longer a part of the main canon that's being expanded on. This is really interesting, despite the fact that there's a lot of references to the old games and inspirations drawn from older games. They also have used this split timeline as a way to retcon different things. Like, for instance, we know from the Vice City games, those took place originally in Florida, but now in GTA 6, while we are going back to the iconic Vice City location, the state is called Leonida instead of Florida. But still, this theory alone doesn't necessarily sit well with everyone, as the abundance of other GTA references to previous games still make a lot of fans think that those games are a part of this universe, even though it's against what Rockstar originally said. It gets even more confusing when we start to wonder where the rest of the Rockstar games potentially could and might not fit into the Grand Theft Auto universe. Do you guys remember the games Manhunt from 2003 and 2007? These games were insane stealth-based survival games. And most notably, these games are known for taking place in Carcer City. There were a ton of references between GTA 3 onward about Manhunt and Carcer City, though with the Grand Theft Auto series allegedly rebooting with the HD universe of games, you would expect that timeline not to have Manhunt in it, as there hasn't been a new Manhunt game in years. Though, right away in GTA 5, Michael makes a reference to doing his first heist in Carcer City, of course. This probably is just a reference and not necessarily a full tie-in, bringing Manhunt into the fold for this specific timeline, but since it was established as a location in the old 3D timeline, and all the locations from the old 3D timeline were mostly reused and repurposed into the new HD timeline, it seems like that location was lifted as well, though there are a lot of other nods to the Manhunt series in the newer HD games as well. So for now, it seems like Manhunt sits over in the old HD timeline. Then some fans have looked to Red Dead Redemption, kind of Rockstar's other biggest series that they have put a game out at least in somewhat of a recent year. A lot of people like to speculate as to whether or not Red Dead Redemption's world is like an old historical Grand Theft Auto world, but of course we know that from Red Dead Redemption, the use of real world locations invalidates the connected timeline thread for Red Dead Redemption, putting it outside of the Grand Theft Auto bubble. There are references to John Marston on a book in GTA 5, but I think if anything, it's just a reference and not anything pulling it all the way into the lore of the connected world. Similarly, LA Noire is another game that's looked at, which also doesn't take place in the Grand Theft Auto universe, as it takes place in real Los Angeles versus Los Santos. Though LA Noire and possibly Red Dead Redemption could exist in the same timeline, Red Dead does take place about 30 years before the events of LA Noire, and there is a reference to John Marston's hat in LA Noire, but that could just be a reference. Also, Red Dead Revolver, a much forgotten game in the Rockstar catalog of games, it does have obviously a lot of references pointed to it from the Red Dead Redemption games, so I think it's safe to say at least these three games are connected. And then we get to the game Bully, which is a little bit interesting. This game we thought would be ruled out of being in any universe, or if it was, maybe it'd be the older 3D universe. But as it turns out, in GTA 4, there's commercials for Bulworth Academy, there's dialogue of characters talking about attending Bulworth Academy, so it looks like the general consensus is that Bully falls into the HD universe despite the timing of its release. There is some speculation that it could also be a part of the old 3D universe, but at the very least, it's definitely a part of the current HD universe. And then that brings us to Max Payne. And right away, no, Max Payne is not a part of the Grand Theft Auto timeline. And while Max Payne was published by Rockstar Games, it was developed by Remedy Entertainment. And Max Payne plays a massive, massive role in one of the biggest connected universes that only recently has really started to become more and more defined. We're talking about the Alan Wake universe. The Alan Wake universe is probably the most confusing timeline of them all, but also one of the only connected universes where the creators of the game are like, oh yeah, these games are definitely a part of the same universe. We're not going to explain it though. That's up for you guys to figure out, but definitely. And man, they run with it. They run with some wild connections to previous games they worked on. And to make it even more complicated, a lot of the games that they reference that are previous games that Remedy Games had worked on, they don't actually own the rights to those games, so they can't directly reference them. So instead we get like alternate reality versions of characters that are just detached enough to legally clear, and then Remedy Games runs wild with it. And it's insane, but also kind of awesome. Let's start with Alan Wake, which originally came out in 2010. This game, right off the bat, has a couple of homages to the Max Payne series that Remedy Games had created and later sold the rights to Rockstar, which I think at the time probably was a smart move to keep their company afloat and cash positive for a while, but I think nowadays in retrospective if they wish they retained the rights to Max Payne. So in Alan Wake, they wanted to put a little Easter egg to Max Payne, and in the trunk of the car at the beginning of the game, you can see a bunch of books spread out all over the place, books that the character Alan Wake allegedly wrote. Now, in the 2 Alan Wake games, you'll learn that Alan Wake is an author, and he wrote a very successful crime series known as Alex Casey. Now, we can see from the book cover, it highly resembles the box art cover of Max Payne 2, but even more so in Alan Wake 1, there were Easter eggs with the voice actor of Max Payne voicing Alex Casey's monologue, and it's very much established in this universe that Alan Wake essentially wrote the Max Payne stories, but in this universe, the character's name is Alex Casey. You following? Good, because it's going to get more complicated. After Alan Wake released, which was published through Microsoft, Remedy Games wanted to make another Alan Wake game, but Microsoft wasn't feeling it, so instead they pivoted and made Quantum Break, another game that Microsoft currently owns all of the rights to. This game has a lot to do with time travel, and it's very confusing, but a lot of plot points that were introduced here would later be echoed in the Alan Wake universe later on. A few important things to note: there's an Easter egg where we see creative director Sam Lake, who was the face model of Max Payne, play the character Alex Casey from Alan Wake, oddly enough trying to investigate the disappearance of Alan Wake from the end of the first game. That's weird, but then things get even weirder, and we'll come back to Quantum Break in a second. This game with its confusing time travel abilities. Do you guys remember the game Control? This was the first game that essentially confirmed a fully connected universe, as Control directly referenced many events from the Alan Wake universe, and there would be later DLC all based around the first Alan Wake story. And while from this point onwards, we knew that these 2 games were connected, they really started running off with the other connections for the other games, and with Remedy Games acquiring the rights back to Alan Wake, and they had a solidified line of 2 games in the same series, they would start going crazy with connecting their older games as loosely and legally as possible back into their universe. So of course these game series already have interdimensional hopping, so there's a lot of ideas of like echoes of characters and other things that can easily be brought into the fold. So while it's not necessarily a straight timeline, more of an umbrella of thematic and direct tie-ins, it definitely is a connected universe. Without getting into spoiler territory for Control or Alan Wake 2 specifically, Alex Casey straight up is brought back into this game as a main character. His facial model is based off of Sam Lake, the same guy who did Max Payne back in the day, and the character is voiced by the same voice actor who originally did the voice for Max Payne, James McCaffrey, who sadly passed away in 2023. Alan Wake 2 takes things a step further though and makes this Alex Casey character not just a fictional character that Alan Wake had created in a book, but also a real detective who just coincidentally shares the name as the popular book character that the character Alan Wake had written.
Yeah, the PI from your books has the same name as me. Great. Moving on.
They even go as far as making references to the Max Payne movie that Remedy had no involvement in.
On more than one occasion, you voiced your reservations about the adaptations.
It's not that. They're their own thing. They've gone with choices that are different from mine. I feel protective about my stories, and these adaptations... I don't know. I guess I just wish I could have been more involved in making them.
There's another character that shows up in Alan Wake 2. He's the sheriff, and his name is Tim Breaker, not to be confused with the word Time Breaker, and he's played by Sean Ashmore, who was one of the main characters from Quantum Break. And then, of course, Alan Wake 2 has a ton of references to Control and Jesse Fadden from that game. The game Death Rally, Remedy Entertainment's first game, shows up in an arcade form. And, matter of fact, Remedy Entertainment is currently working on a remake of Max Payne 1 and 2 as a single game, utilizing the same engine that they used for Alan Wake 2 and Control, which will be published by Rockstar. And interestingly enough, apparently Remedy Entertainment was the company to approach Rockstar about potentially getting to remake the Max Payne games, even if Remedy Entertainment has a little bit of a turbulent history with Rockstar, as there was this whole trademark issue with Remedy Entertainment's logo resembling the Rockstar Games logo too closely. Remedy was willing to put that stuff aside so that they could have the opportunity to remake their 2 games that they made before they had to sell the license to the series away back to Rockstar. So I have a feeling Remedy Entertainment's going to take this opportunity in this remake to maybe hide some more Easter eggs and connections that shows how closely intertwined Max Payne's story is into Alan Wake 2, Control, and Quantum Break. And similarly, if they had the rights to use Quantum Break, I assume they would do more with the story there as well, but they kind of have to walk on this like legal thin line. But yeah, ultimately, who would have thought all of these games would be connected in such a unique way? And this is just like the surface level explanation. The Alex Casey stuff alone is very, very impressive in how they pulled off this in the narrative form, especially if you've played Alan Wake 2, and if you haven't, you should check it out. But I don't know if giddy is the right word to explain this, but it is a really cool connection. This is probably by far my favorite connected universe, I guess. The Alan Wake Everse, the Remedy connected universe is probably the better name for it. But it's just really cool. They take a lot of elements from these games, they connect them, they make you think about it, and then just when you think you start to understand it, then they kind of throw you a curveball. And I think the way that they've used Alex Casey and Max Payne together is very clever, and also, I'm curious to see where they go with that in the future.
Elden Ring was an amazing game, and probably the best game I've played within this decade so far, and maybe even the last decade, I don't know. Nonetheless, the game had multiple endings that were kind of vague and kind of left a lot open. So there's a lot of theories how these endings of Elden Ring connect to other From Software games like Dark Souls, Demon Souls, or Bloodborne. Now, from my understanding, these are all just fan theories, and there's no official confirmation from Software that any of this is connected to any of the other games. And I think in the past, Miyazaki even said that Elden Ring is not connected to Dark Souls. But nonetheless, that doesn't keep fans from speculating. And obviously I'm gonna talk about the endings, so it's a light spoiler warning, but honestly the endings are so vague and the story in Elden Ring is not the main focus of why the game is great. And honestly, I've played through Elden Ring 2 times, I got 2 different endings, and I don't know what the hell is going on either. But from my very basic understanding, these fan theories revolve around the Frenzied Flame ending, the Age of Stars ending, and the Destined Death ending. So in the Frenzied Flame ending, the world is set on fire and the Golden Order is destroyed. And there's fans who theorize that the Golden Order would become the undead in Dark Souls, which is the main faction you play as. And obviously the Dark Souls universe was created with the First Flame, which is like an event that formed the world. Kind of like the Big Bang, I guess. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it. Then the next ending is the Age of Stars ending, which is all around Rani and the moon and like moon power and lunar magic or whatever. And the moon is also a heavy theme in Bloodborne, so the theory is that this directly leads into Bloodborne. And the last one is the Destined Death ending, which would lead into Demon Souls, and I think this is the weakest theory that has the least ground to stand on, because I think the main point is that both of them kind of talk about destiny and death, and that really is the only connection between the Destined Death ending and Demon Souls. And I mean, these are just theories, as I said, but they're kind of cool, and if they do become true in the future and they make this Elden Ring universe or this From Software universe, it would be kind of sick. But also, these are very vague connections, and I think most of what I just said about the endings leading into the other games can be explained away and doesn't really line up. So it's all just a theory.
Okay, but hold on. Luke didn't go deep enough with this because look here. Patches is the key to all of the answers of the Soulsborne Elden Ring universe connected. He's essentially this random dude that shows up in most From Software games, which might be a connecting piece to tie everything together. I don't know how yet, but I think he is. Maybe he's like an interdimensional universe traveler. I don't know. But look, he shows up in Demon Souls. Then he's in the Dark Souls games. He shows up in Bloodborne as this. The character shows up in Armored Core. And while he doesn't show up in Sekiro, there is speculation from the fan community that this dude is him. I don't know why. Okay, that's it. That's my case. Okay, I'll be honest with you. The Call of Duty series originally wasn't a game series that I really was too confused with when it came to connected timelines and whatnot. Back in the day, it was really easy to follow. There was the Infinity Ward games, which were the Modern Warfare trilogy, and then like maybe you could tack on Call of Duty 1 and 2 before that. And then there was like the Treyarch Black Ops series, which was World at War, Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4, and it was simple. But nowadays, the Call of Duty timeline is more confusing than ever before because there's been like an effort to try to combine all of the Call of Duty games that release yearly into a single timeline, which means some games get to have the opposite treatment of a lot of the games we're talking about in this video, where now all of a sudden games are no longer a part of the core canon timeline that once were, at least in their own timeline, if that makes sense. I mean, a lot of people could have assumed the original Modern Warfare trilogy was being retconned away from canon status when Activision decided to reboot the Modern Warfare series. We just didn't expect all of the ripple effects that would come afterwards. Also, side note, apparently Infinite Warfare was in the same universe as Modern Warfare 1, 2, and 3 from back in the day. It just took place like way in the future. It's not really relevant, but pointing it out. But yeah, this timeline, dead. Kill it off because now there's the new updated timeline and it is was so confusing, and there's a Reddit user with the name Lola Zomurda who went through and essentially organized the multiverse of Call of Duty and also painstakingly put in order what the current timeline we believe is that Activision's working with for all future Call of Duties, though anything could get retconned at any point nowadays. A lot of this confusion started when Call of Duty Cold War released, because this game very clearly was a true form sequel to Call of Duty Black Ops 1, taking place before Call of Duty Black Ops 2, but they wanted to do some tie-in stuff with the larger multiplayer Warzone thing that was popping off in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 and Warzone. So while Cold War kind of shifted itself into the middle of this Call of Duty Black Ops timeline, Activision also decided to insert every other Call of Duty game that was going to release. All of a sudden, Zakhaev, a villain from the old Call of Duty 4, who I guess plays a role now in the larger Call of Duty universe, shows up in Cold War. This was crazy. It was an Infinity Ward thing just kind of showing up in a Treyarch game that was unheard of at the time. Okay, so we'll link this timeline below, but essentially, the events of Zombies and Tag der Toten essentially resulted in Nikolai designing a universe that ends up being the canon timeline, I guess is the theory, where Activision's probably working with this timeline of Call of Duty, World at War, World War II, Vanguard, and Vanguard Zombies all existing and being canon, which then led to Black Ops 1, Cold War Zombies, Black Ops 2, the past prequel levels. Then bam, Modern Warfare 19, Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, Modern Warfare 2, and Modern Warfare 3 all squeeze in there before allegedly Black Ops 2 takes place. Unless the next Call of Duty game retcons all the future levels from Call of Duty Black Ops 2, which while it is nice to at least have somewhat of a clear-cut picture as what's going on with this timeline, as confusing as it is, it does mean many Call of Duty games just essentially got shifted into the no longer relevant or not canon category, which is the original Modern Warfare trilogy, probably Call of Duty 1 and 2 and 3 while we're at it. Call of Duty Ghosts was never a part of any timeline. It was trying to do its own thing, but then it never got a sequel. And Advanced Warfare also gets thrown away at the same time. It doesn't mean we can't ever see characters show up in the main timeline, but they'll likely be new versions of the character reintroduced, kind of like how Rourke randomly showed up in Warzone for Vanguard. I would say half of the timeline being as confusing as it is likely a result of all of these other games being inserted into one continuity, and then the other half is a result of Zombies now being a part of the main continuity, even if it's not necessarily in your face when you're playing through the campaign. Very much so, the rest of Zombies nowadays alludes to it being a part of the main story. I think this is more complicated than it needs to be, but it's the route that they're at least choosing for now, unless they choose to go back and retcon stuff later.
Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, Ghost Recon, and Splinter Cell are very much set in the same universe and are interconnected. Like some bigger examples that obviously come to mind is that Sam Fisher from Splinter Cell shows up in both Rainbow Six Siege as an operator and in Ghost Recon Wildlands as a character that is part of the story. What's also interesting with this Clancyverse is that it's set in modern time and the characters kind of age with it. So the version of Sam Fisher we see nowadays is an older version than what Sam Fisher was back in the original games, which I think is a very interesting thing of this Clancyverse or whatever you want to call it. And obviously these games are also connected with the same developer. They're all published and developed by Ubisoft, which that's a big thing, and they all focus on tactical gadgets and realistic military operations, espionage, and geopolitical events. Now, I do think on top of all that, the Hawk series is also set in the same universe as Splinter Cell, Rainbow Six, and Ghost Recon. But not all of them are actually set in the same universe. For example, The Division is completely outside of the Rainbow Six or Ghost Recon universe, and besides some Easter eggs, has no connection to the other franchises. But you also got stuff like Tom Clancy's End War, which is presumably an alternate timeline because there's Team Rainbow and the Ghosts are fighting in their opposite factions, and Ghost Recon and Rainbow Six are two interconnected franchises nowadays, so it kind of makes no sense that they had this big faction war in End War, so it has to be an alternate timeline, I guess. And I would say majority of them are set in the same universe. And if they're not set in the same universe, there's at least references and similarities that you can maybe look at and be like, oh, this must be an alternate timeline of this Tom Clancy universe. So I think they're all connected, but they're not all set in the same universe, and there might be different timelines. And that's obviously just my theory, because let's say The Division, there's this outbreak and the city being taken over, and why is nobody from Ghost Recon or Rainbow Six helping, and where are they? It's just kind of weird. And in my head, that's the strongest reason it has to be set in an alternate timeline. But The other Tom Clancy games, a lot of them are very much connected and share the same universe, they share the same characters, and they share the same events happening within their universe.
Now, we will also be including game series that have their own contained multiverse or connected universe that have connections to game series that might surprise you. A really good example of this is the Shin Megami Tensei series, which, oh my god, there's so many Shin Megami Tensei games, and they've branched off their timelines so many times where some of the games are in their own timeline, some of their games are in their own universe, but ultimately there is this multiverse of Atlas games. It doesn't include all Atlas games, so that is worth noting, where many game series that are now commonplace originally started off as a branch of the Megami Tensei series. There's Megami Tensei, Shin Megami Persona, before Persona became its own series. And while there's questions on which timeline each Persona game takes place in, there's this common thread that the monsters encountered in Persona a lot of the times are the same monsters encountered in a Shin Megami game. Take that a step further, in the new Atlas game coming out later this year, Metaphor ReFantazio, or whatever that's called, essentially a new IP created by the creators of Persona 3, 4, and 5, is going to be taking place in a brand new setting and maybe its own universe, but we can already tell that this technically falls under the umbrella of a Shin Megami Tensei game or a Persona game because of the elements of like the monsters reappearing from Shin Megami continuing to show up here. Here's another interesting thread that starts with Shin Megami Tensei again, but back in 1995, Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner released, which would then spin off into its own series existing in the Shin Megami Tensei universe, multiverse, whatever you want to call it. Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner would get a sequel game that was the official spin-off, this time called Devil Summoner Soul Hackers. And then years later in 2022, we just got Soul Hackers 2, which dropped the Shin Megami, it dropped the Devil Summoner, but it kept the Soul Hackers and the number 2, I guess. Obviously, another game connected to this franchise that doesn't look like it's necessarily connected to Shin Megami Tensei at the surface. So maybe these games aren't connected necessarily in the same universe, but they're definitely a connected franchise that a lot of people don't realize are as closely connected as they truly are. Catherine's another game that definitely people don't necessarily associate with the Shin Megami Tensei universe, but it sits right there as well, being created by the team that worked on Persona 4. The main character, Vincent, has shown up in Persona 3, and later releases of Catherine would also have tie-ins with Persona 5 Royal. But this game definitely is one of the larger outliers in the overall Shin Megami Tensei series, as the gameplay is the most different from a typical Shin Megami Tensei game, but a lot of the gameplay is more in line with the social aspects that were really big in Persona later on. So while it is closer to its connection with Persona, we also can't forget that Persona started off as a Shin Megami Tensei spinoff. Now, backtracking a bit, give me a second to get really nerdy on the Shin Megami Tensei universe for a second, and if none of this makes sense, it's okay because it's not really relevant, but I'm gonna say it. Shin Megami Tensei 2 came out in 1994, and that game had multiple different endings. One of the endings retcons like the existing universe and the future Shin Megami Tensei games, but another ending continues the Shin Megami Tensei games. The main Shin Megami Tensei line would continue in this post-apocalyptic world. However, the branch where the time travel stops Tokyo from being destroyed, I think, would become the Devil Summoner series. And if I understand the fan consensus on how the timeline goes, Devil Summoner 2 ends up forking into 3 different directions based on the ending, one becoming the Shin Megami If series, which from one of those forks is where the Persona universe essentially starts from. It's like a fork of a fork of a fork. This image describes the timeline the best, and we'll put a link to it in the description down below, but it is one of the most confusing things to follow. But if you are just curious on how the lineage works and why things branch off from what, this is probably the best fan theory at the moment on how all of these games are actually connected, even though we could just put all the games into like an umbrella and be like, yep, that's the franchise. I like the people who are trying to draw the actual lines connecting everything at the same time. There's also branches connecting things like the Digital Devil Saga, Devil Survivor, which are separate from the main Shin Megami Tensei series. Then there's like a gray area with some other games that people think could count, but they're not necessarily connected, so they're not fully a part of this direct lineage, like Tokyo Mirage or the Trauma Center games. I don't know, it's some crazy stuff.
Now, this next connection isn't quite on the same level of some of the other ones we've talked about, but in a way, System Shock and Bioshock are interconnected throughout the development history of both of these games. And I mean, it's pretty clear that when Bioshock released, it was supposed to be a spiritual successor to System Shock, which to me personally makes these games more connected than not. Now, System Shock 1 and 2 released in 1994 and 1999, and both of these games were created by Looking Glass Studios. Now, Looking Glass Studios would end up closing down, and Ken Levine, who was a key figure at Looking Glass and a key figure in the development of System Shock, went went on to found Irrational Games with some of his former co-workers, which is the studio that ended up creating the Bioshock games. Now, there's no direct character connection or even a broader story connection between Bioshock and System Shock, but besides the connected development history that these games share, there's also some thematic themes that both of these games share as well. Both of these games kind of revolve around this dystopian settings where the ambition of scientists and technology went unchecked, and this advancement kind of is destroying humanity. You know, now obviously System Shock is set in space on a space station and Bioshock is set underwater, but what I mean is, in a way, both of these games tell the same cautionary tale. Besides that, there's also a lot of gameplay elements that are similar between these games. Again, I don't think these games are directly connected in terms of story or characters, but their development lineage, their thematic explorations, and their shared gameplay mechanics kind of create this indirect connection. And now that Ken Levine also moved on from the Bioshock franchise, he's creating Judas, which kind of is another game that is very much looking like it's gonna be a spiritual successor to the Bioshock franchise. So it's kind of moving forward in the same way. And we obviously don't know yet how big there is connections between Judas, Bioshock, and System Shock. But besides the gameplay in Judas obviously looking Bioshock-esque, I feel like there's also gonna be the same or similar themes that are gonna be explored. And I think it's kind of cool to treat these spiritual successors as like this interconnected kind of universe, because there's the same creative minds that worked on them, and if they come from the same creative mind, to me it's totally fair to say these games are connected in a way. Also, a little fun fact I learned when doing research for this topic is that the indie game Gone Home is kind of connected to Bioshock as well, because the lead designer worked on some parts of Bioshock 2, and in Bioshock you can play this game called Spitfire, and in Gone Home you can find a Super Spitfire cartridge, kind of tying these two franchises together. And the lead developer himself said that in a very light way they're implying that Bioshock takes place in the same universe as System Shock, and then obviously they're trying to imply that Bioshock and System Shock are connected to Gone Home as well.
Now here's another interesting thing, and I sat down to talk to Luke about this one because it's a little bit out there, but Luke, do you remember PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds?
Yes, yeah.
You've never heard of this game, dude? PUBG?
PUBG?
So for a while they were really trying to do something weird with I don't know what they were trying to do. Remember that cinematic trailer they showed off? I think it was at like the Game Awards or something.
I remember we're like baffled how, like, what does this mean? What are they doing?
Like, why? Since when was there a story to PUBG? And then did they ever do anything with that?
I don't think so, but I think I know where you're getting at with this.
Callisto Protocol. So originally Callisto Protocol started off as a spin-off of PUBG, or at least was supposed to be in the PUBG universe, but then later on in development they announced that they were dropping the connection to PUBG and that it actually was going to be its own universe. And I think that that's so weird that like they were going for this like Marvel style connected universe with PUBG of all games, and then I mean, probably cutting that is an interesting choice. They did end up keeping a single Easter egg where they put the level 3 or the tier 3 helmet, which was like iconic for PUBG, like on one of the tables in Callisto Protocol. So I'm looking at the PUBG website and they have a whole page dedicated to the PUBG universe. Wait, is this a timeline of the universe? It starts in the 15th century with horses?
Yeah, I mean, we've never seen it, but I guess they have been doing like events in PUBG, right? Like the throwback event we had. What is it called? Erangel? So I guess they've been doing lore drops.
Yeah, so who would have known? The PUBG multiverse universe? Connected universe. It's not a multiverse, right?
No, but there's multiple games in it, apparently.
PUBG Battlegrounds, PUBG Mobile, Battlegrounds Mobile India, which got shut down by India, and New State Mobile.
Right, and then at some point, Callisto Protocol was also in there.
Right.
Just not anymore, I guess.
Okay, there's also... This one's a little bit more out there, one that I've been deep diving into in the past on my own free time for whatever reason. But let's talk about Halo and the connected Bungie Paraverse. Now, this is an interesting topic because I've looked into it before. I've pitched it to friends before. I've annoyed Luke with me trying to over-explain these connections that I've found. So I decided, let's go even deeper and talk directly to Luke and pitch this Paraverse theory about Halo and Destiny and maybe Marathon. All these Bungie games being connected.
How about this? You just tell me. I've never heard of this, Elijah. This is the first time I'm hearing of this.
What do you...
This is the very first time, not the millionth time. So tell me about it.
You love talking about Halo.
I love Halo. So now tell me about the Bungie Paraverse, because I'm I have no idea what that means.
Okay, so if you guys don't know what this theory is, for a long time, there's been a lot of speculation that the ending of Halo 3 kind of thematically ties into a previous Bungie series that Bungie was working on before the Halo days, Marathon. Essentially, if you look closely into the lore of Marathon, those games open up very similarly to the way that Halo 3 ends. Essentially, we have this space marine waking up from cryosleep and just like finds like things are going nuts out there. He's by some weird planet and he has to like talk to different onboard AI to figure things out. Now, very obviously, they're not directly connected. Terminology is different, and there's a lot of different little things, but there's a lot of similarities also. There's just a lot of different little things, like the names the Marines have, and a lot of the story elements, and kind of just where things go. It very much feels like they purposely at least set up Halo 3 to end in a way that mirrored the way that the Marathon games began. And there's a ton of Marathon imagery all over the place in Halo games.
So let's say like Halo 3 leads into Marathon 1, I guess, where like the guy wakes up, right? How does Destiny fit into this?
Well, here's the thing, right? So, mind you, this is like old theories from back in the day, and they're not talked about as much online because like these are things that were talked about before like 343 took over and before like the Master Chief story was continued. But originally, Halo 3 was just like the end of the Master Chief story, and thematically you could make the assumption that like the Marathon story would pick up afterwards. But now Destiny is interesting because there was already a couple of Destiny setups in the Halo universe way beforehand, just for whatever reason, just making these like acknowledgments of Destiny. Like Halo 3 ODST in the original Xbox 360 version, there was these posters that said like Destiny awaits. And this was before Destiny was even announced, like before people even knew Destiny was going to be a thing. And those were taken out of the re-releases of the game. While obviously these games take place in separate universes, I think there's a case to be made that there is this like multiverse with Halo, Destiny, and Marathon that obviously Bungie can't really do too much with the Halo side of things because of like Microsoft rights and stuff. But I feel like there is this like enclosed umbrella that Halo does fall in, that somewhere within the Bungie lore, they're aware that Halo is this multiversal part of the larger Bungie lore. And now Bungie's going back to Marathon. They're bringing that back. And I think that we're going to continue to see Halo just in the background, never fully up front. But obviously when they did the whole Bungie 30th anniversary, they kind of started to crack things open, and they even in a way started using terms like Paraverse to describe like some of these interesting things that were happening in the Destiny universe that were kind of referencing other Bungie titles. So like there was the Halo references with like the cryopod that like alludes to Master Chief, which already they'd done the cryopod thing one time before in Destiny 1. But then there was other things like Marathon references showing up in Destiny all of a sudden, and that was something that kind of only happened in Halo beforehand. And there was just a lot of things, and they kind of wrote it off as, oh, there's this Paraverse, these para-casual events happening that cross over into the Destiny universe. They have this horse that's made out of stars. It's a whole thing.
So are you saying it's more like a creative like string connecting all these like games and like kind of like in the background, just like thematically kind of?
It's very much just like a theory, right? Like this is just like the one, like my one tinfoil hat theory that I'm gonna just go die on that hill. I would say it's a more loosely connected than like the Alan Wake universe we talked about, but still like there is this acknowledgement that these stories in a way are connected. And I think the biggest thing that Bungie uses to show that these games are still relevant years later, even after they stop making games like Halo, is that thematic events and thematic stories and narrative lines are continued throughout the universe. So that's why like the connection from Halo 3 to Marathon is relevant. While Master Chief's story does technically end in Halo 3 for the Bungie universe, in a way it kind of thematically continues on through the first Marathon game. And I think that that's kind of an interesting perspective when you start to peel things away from Halo now, especially if you've been frustrated with like 343 Industries and the story that they've been going down. There's now like another option. There's the non-canon or non-343 canon Halo universe that just has, you know, the Halo trilogy, Reach, and ODST, and that's it. And then the larger Bungie universe that's kind of connected underneath it in some upside down paraverse, essentially.
I got two things to say to that. The first one is, I am down to retcon anything 343 has ever done, and I like that this kind of gives it. And I like the Halo 3 to Marathon connection, right? That one, I feel like it's very clear, and like that's like a thematic like thing that I can accept. But I kind of can't wrap my mind around the connection to Destiny, really, besides like some Easter eggs in Halo, and then like some like references or like design stuff in like Destiny now with like the 30th anniversary event, right? That connection just isn't as strong as the Marathon the Marathon Halo 3 connection to me.
I used to like have this stuff like, you know what I mean? Like I was deep.
You got rusty. Did you get rusty?
Dude, there was a time where I was deep in the trenches on this theory, where even the Destiny connections, which I do agree, like the Destiny connections are a lot looser, but there was a time where I was like, you know, quick with like how it was all connected. I agree. I think like obviously there's not like a timeline where the Earth that appears in Destiny is parallel to the Earth that happens in Halo. Like Halo doesn't have a traveler show up, but I do think the acknowledgement of like there's this this other soldier who had seen so many battles. It's a reference in Destiny 1, right? Or was it early Destiny 2? The first time they did the pod, and one of the Ghost's dialogue lines talks about, essentially describes Master Chief, and then says that Master Chief had seen this character who's in a cryopod, had seen enough battles for a lifetime or something like that, so he wasn't awoken by a ghost to become a guardian. And there's also another little part that's kind of interesting, but remember the terminology guardian was really heavily used back in the Halo days, and then they use it as like the core feature, the core character name in Destiny. It's not necessarily like, oh, this is proof, look, they're connected, but it's like these thematic ideas, right? It just shows that there is this loose connection, like this like magnetism, that while these universes are separate, they can kind of run parallel to each other. And I think that's where this idea of like a paraverse, that is this term that Bungie kept using, especially during the 30th anniversary stuff, to kind of insinuate that a lot of the things that were showing up, like the battle rifle, which is called a BXR, right? And you know, the weapon that's half energy sword called, I think it's called like half truths, even stuff like that. Like it's a little more than just like an Easter egg or a reference. It's a little more, but obviously they can't go too much further with it. I think if Bungie could, they would just fully embrace it and like do some like weird, like, I mean, it'd still be a special event. I think it'd still be separate, but I think if they had the ability to, they would have gone like way further with some of the connections and nuanced things, but obviously they can't. So I think it's loose. I made this image that you can show on the screen that has my chicken scratch theories about how I think everything's connected. This was made way back when we were like really deep into Halo lore. I think there's something. I don't know what or how to explain it, but I think we'll see more when Marathon comes out, hopefully. And then maybe over the course of the next 20 years, we'll see more. Anything 343's touched with like the remasters and stuff and re-releases, I still consider that like the new canon. Like if they changed something from a game, it becomes the 343 Halo canon. But those core original releases of the Bungie era Halo games could be separate on its own thing. Because remember Halo 2 did that whole thing with the prequel cutscene for Halo 2 Anniversary, where they were trying to set up Halo 5 as if Halo 2 was like a prequel to Halo 5 with Locke. And it almost suggests that everything that happens in the Master Chief Collection is Locke and Arbiter having this flashback to everything. And I think they did a couple of cutscenes and trailer stuff to allude to that. Like, what if MCC and everything 343's touched is really just a bubble in this separate thing? You know what I mean? And they are retconning stuff through there. I don't know. I'm getting way down the rabbit hole, but you get what I mean.
And I think this was your original theory, like there's like basically two Halo timelines.
I'd like to think that in the Bungie timeline, Master Chief is still just like floating in space, or if you wanted to like assume what happened to Master Chief afterwards, then like you could assume Master Chief went on an adventure similar to what the Marathon character does in Marathon, even if like the terminology is different. Like thematically, his Master Chief story might run concurrently or similarly to what the Marathon character goes through. Okay, another simple one that we could talk about that's interesting. This one's probably not as deep, but it is kind of fun. But Kane Lynch, surprisingly enough, apparently existed in at least the older Hitman universe. There was like a couple of small nods that they did. At first, that was just kind of like an Easter egg, but then they like straight up took Kane and threw him in the game as like a little like background character in one of the Hitman games.
We're talking about like the pre-Hitman 2016 then, right?
Yeah, I
Like
think they rebooted the timeline, or
Right.
I think
I mean,
it's its own timeline. But
yeah.
it was in Blood Money. There was like a reference in a newspaper, and then in Absolution, like the character is just like chilling there. So I don't know. I just thought that that's kind of an interesting one. Not necessarily something like a whole section of the video to talk about, but
Right, but like just a little interesting inclusion, yeah.
yeah, there was definitely a time where people were like, oh, "How are they going to connect this? Will this be a nod for Kane Lynch 3?" And then they never made another Kane Lynch game again. So
Yeah, those games were kind of...
dude, I never actually played a Kane Lynch game.
I don't know, I always had the feeling they were kind of divisive. There was people who really liked them, people who really hated them.
Dude, I thought it was a Dog the Bounty Hunter game.
Like, the TV guy?
Yeah, like they did a game called Kane Lynch 2 Dog Days, and I thought like it was like related to the TV show.
Oh my god.
I didn't know anything about it. I mean, what year did that come out in? I was young, right?
I don't know, but Doug the Bounty Hunter, dude. Who's giving that guy his own game?
Dude, Dog the Bounty. Was it around the same time as Dog the Bounty? This is 2010. Yeah, you know, same time. I mean, the character on the front kind of looks like him, right?
I don't know, it's like a fat white guy with like not a lot of hair, right?
Yeah, and like a tank top. Well, though he has long hair though, like Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Long hair, but like it's like thin, right?
Well, yeah, I thought maybe it was in his later years. I don't know.
Yeah, they made a sequel to the TV show in video game form about like this reality TV show where this guy pretends to arrest people.
He doesn't pretend. He puts them under civilian arrest.
Yeah, I'm sure it's all real.
Don't ruin this for me.
You ever seen that towing reality TV show?
Oh, South Beach Tow, dude?
Yeah, the one that's really fake when the lady falls off the parking garage.
It's not fake. It's not fake. Dude, I saw the episode where they had a drive-by shooting happen at their towing company.
That's crazy.
The show's not fake, okay?
No, it's real. Okay, so you actually recently played Nier, right?
I played a little bit of it. I got stuck.
A little bit of it, right? And then before they made Nier, they made Drakengard, right? Which is actually connected to Nier.
Is it really?
There's multiple endings in Drakengard. There's 5 endings, and I think ending E is what people refer to it. It's the one that leads into Nier. The way this game ends with the ending E is the cause of Nier. So what happens at the end is like when you fight the final boss, it's like a time guy, time queen. I don't know too much of the lore. And then you get transported into Tokyo 2003.
Wait, what? That sounds so cool.
You just get transported into Tokyo, right? So now you defeat the final boss. There's like this big ass like woman statue. I don't know. And you defeat the boss. You're like sitting there on your dragon, right? Like the main guy. The military comes in and blows you up with rockets. Like the main protagonist and his dragon die at the end of this ending. And that sets off like the epidemic that causes like the downfall of humanity basically. And is the reason eventually like the replicants were like made, and then like in Nier Replicant and Nier Automata, like all the humans are gone, and it's just like their souls transplanted into these like robots, right?
They did Nier Automata and they did Nier Replicant. I think Nier Replicant's a remake of just Nier with no subtitle. I think. So is that Nier the sequel to Drakengard?
I mean, yes, but like it's more like these events, like Nier's like set in the future of what's happened after, right? Like this epidemic breaks out, like there's like people that turn into zombies, and like the humanity can't defeat the virus, so they make like replicants and transfer the souls of humans into these replicants. And then like time goes by, and then like Nier happens, from my understanding.
Right. Potential spoiler warning.
But like, I mean, this like epidemic happened in 2003, right? Or started in 2003. By 2009, I think they were making the robot. So like the game is definitely not set in 2009 that you were playing.
But there is this like question as why the robots were created, I think.
I mean, the reason is that outbreak.
Well, no, they're trying to explore it. That's like the plot of Nier is what I'm saying.
So it's so far in the future that I even forgot what's going on. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, I guess, for this
7-year-old game. 8-year-old game. Yeah. And then at some point it becomes on you.
And I mean, maybe you want to play it more now that you know what's going on, you know?
Dude, if I could beat this boss fight, I'd play it more, but I'm stuck. Next time you come over, will you try it?
Sure, I'll try.
Then there was another game that I don't know anything about. I've never really played too much of the Final Fantasy games. As you know from, I think it was 2 videos ago, we were talking about Final Fantasy, and you were trying to explain to me that all of the Final Fantasy games are like in their own universe.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand that. I always thought there was just one timeline, and I was always confused by that. But now, take it a step further, but isn't there some connection between Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy also? But I don't get how that even works, because if Final Fantasy has like 100 universes in its own universe, and then the other Final Fantasy games aren't necessarily ever connected to other Final Fantasy games other than like nods and homages and stuff, Like, how does Kingdom Hearts fit in?
You know, there's a simple explanation. Multiverses.
But is it a connected multiverse or is it a detached multiverse?
What was a detached multiverse? How can it be a detached multiverse?
Super Smash Bros, right?
Right.
Like, it has all these characters come in and they do these crossover events. But like, nobody's like trying to map out how like the Super Smash Bros multiverse connects characters. Nobody's expecting like Yoshi to randomly show up in Metal Gear Solid because of their connection to Smash Bros, right? Nobody's like, oh, it's because they're in the same multiverse, Yoshi might show up in Metal Gear. You know what I mean? That's like a detached multiverse. Where like a connected multiverse is more like Shin Megami Tensei, where like they have monsters that show up in Persona 4 that might show up in like a Shin Megami game. And if like, let's say they do a storyline, I think they did do a storyline at one point where like these characters are like fighting the final boss and the final boss is like potentially about to destroy the entire multiverse, right? And like, I think like that scale would be like, if the multiverse gets destroyed, then like all of the little universes, pocket universes that Atlas has would get destroyed, right? Where like a detached multiverse, like you wouldn't worry. Like if Yoshi was in the same situation and Yoshi's multiverse was about to be destroyed, you wouldn't worry about Metal Gear Solid getting destroyed. You know what I mean? Like that is, I mean, that's like the worst way to describe it. But you see what I mean? Like, I mean, like an intentional multiverse versus like multiverse. That's how we're writing this to be happening.
First of all, I think the Kingdom Hearts characters are from one Final Fantasy timeline, right? That show up, and I think that timeline is like a spin-off timeline. I don't even know, and I think like I don't know if so. The Final Fantasy characters are canon in the Kingdom Hearts universe, right? But the Kingdom Hearts characters are not canon in the Final Fantasy universe. Does that make sense? It's like a one-way street.
I don't understand.
They're Final Fantasy characters, and they're like different versions, I guess, or like in the Kingdom Hearts universe. They just exist in the Kingdom Hearts universe. They don't like cross over. They're not like the ones. They're technically not the ones from that universe. Does that make sense? And they don't go back. Like Goofy is not going to show up in Final Fantasy.
Why not?
The mouse is preventing him.
Time Lord Goofy, dude. This does lead us into like another point I wanted to bring up though. But like, what's going on with Mario and Sonic, dude? Are they in the same timeline? Are they in the same universe? Is Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games like multi-dimensional like competition?
Definitely.
Where the two timelines clash together and then they play sports? Or are they just in the same universe? What if they're just like in the same...
Yeah, I mean, we know Sonic goes to Earth sometimes, right? In some media.
Does he?
I mean, like the movie.
Wait.
What? In the movie is on our Earth.
Oh, yeah, I guess. I guess that's something.
And then we know that Mario traveled to like Peking, Tokyo, all these Olympic Games, right? So like they all exist on Earth, dude. It's our Earth with Mario and Sonic on it, and we're just living here.
Okay. But then like how far does that go? Like does all of Mario's endeavors, like does Mario going into Smash Bros, is that canon to Mario or is that separate?
Well, Smash Bros is different from Olympic Games, you know, because like that's like a whole nother kind of worms.
Right, it's not as big of a festival. It's a festivity, dude.
At least like Mario and Sonic, they keep to themselves. They don't like get everyone.
They keep to themselves, dude.
Yeah, they don't get everyone and their mama in there. Like, you know, how like we got Persona in there. We got like...
What's the lore with the Rabbids?
Oh, that's another crossover, yeah.
Like, how do they get in there? Like, do they just show up?
Okay, so Rayman, Mario, and Sonic are all connected, right?
I mean, I guess. But like, how far does that go? Because is Rayman a part of the Ubisoft verse? And is the Ubisoft verse the part of the Tom Clancy universe?
No, because Rayman is like in a little cartoon world, dude. He's not gonna hang out with Sam Fisher.
I was playing the X-Defiant beta, right? Or the alpha that they did. And I was running through the training grounds because I was looking at a map. And they literally have a Rainbow Six room. They have a Far Cry room. And they have a Rayman room.
But like, okay, so let me explain that away right now, right?
Okay.
It's just like in the X-Defiant universe, right? Someone is just a huge Ubisoft nerd. And that's it.
And he like built an office, and that's the story.
Like some like Bitcoin millionaire that just built like a Ubisoft style office, you know?
Yeah, I like that. I think that's the better way to go. They represented all of Rainbow Six Siege by having like a little entranceway that looked like Bank. It wasn't even cool, dude. It had like a vault and stuff, and I don't know. Like I was like, this doesn't even happen in the game. It was like they hadn't even played Rainbow Six, which I guess is on par for Ubisoft. In my notes, Luke, I wrote Banjo, Sonic, Mario universe, and I don't remember how they're all connected.
Banjo
Kazooie.
I mean, Smash Bros is the only connection for Banjo, no?
No, I remember now. No, Luke. It goes way deeper. We don't do Smash. We already have kind of agreed Smash Bros doesn't count, right? Smash Bros, I think it's its own universe where the video games are all video games, right? Like our universe kind of. And then there's like some crazy kid who collects the toys and then makes them fight in his head.
Like if Toy Story was bad.
Yeah, exactly like Toy Story. Yep, Toy Story. Okay, so, but Banjo, dude, no. We have an actual connection that brings us to Mario and Sonic. So we know Mario and Sonic are the same universe, at least to an extent, right? We have that connection down pat. Then we know Mario and Donkey Kong. Those are fairly connected. Like, I mean, they play golf together. They go and they play baseball. They hang out. They have some history, some beef. But I think they've worked that out mostly.
They squashed it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then Donkey Kong's best friend. Who is he?
His son, Diddy Kong?
I don't think it's his son, Diddy Kong.
Is it not his son?
I think they're friends.
Wait, is it not his son? How is it not his son?
I don't even think they're related.
What? Why does he have the same last name?
I don't know. They all do. Diddy Kong's girlfriend's name's Dixie Kong, and they're not related, I think. I hope.
I thought it was like, just like, I don't know. I always thought they were all related.
I'm looking it up. Diddy Kong is, he's Donkey Kong's best friend and sidekick.
How's he not his son? What the hell?
He's not his son. Who is Diddy Kong's dad? Kong family. Do they have a family tree?
Is it a circle?
Okay, there's Cranky Kong.
Yeah, and Cranky Kong is the grandpa of everyone.
He's the original Donkey Kong, the one from the arcade cabinet. He is Donkey Kong Jr.'s father, and then Donkey Kong Jr. from the game Donkey Kong Jr. had a son, and that's the current Donkey Kong.
And who's Diddy Kong? How is he not related? This is actually...
He's also Diddy Kong's great-grandfather.
Wait, so yeah, they are related. What?
Are they nephews and uncles?
Okay, I'll accept that. But at least they're related, dude. There's no way, like, they all share the last name. And I mean, like, maybe Diddy Kong is, you know, hitting on his cousin. And I mean, like, if you live on an island, maybe there isn't as many options.
So, Donkey Kong.fandom says that Diddy Kong is Donkey Kong's nephew and his little buddy, and Dixie Kong's boyfriend. Dixie Kong is Diddy Kong's girlfriend and Tiny Kong's older sister, and Chunky and Kitty Kong's older cousin.
So, Diddy Kong is boning his cousin.
No. I don't think Dixie, Tiny, Chunky, or Kitty are related. I hope.
Are you sure the family tree isn't a circle?
I think we're in the clear.
So, like, Mario connected to Donkey Kong, and then how's Donkey Kong connected to Banjo?
Diddy Kong Racing for the Nintendo 64 had two characters show up. We had Banjo and Conker, and they both showed up in that racing game.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So technically, they're there. They got to count, right?
I'll accept that.
If you look on the Donkey Kong family fandom wiki, it has Banjo and Kazooie as like the 6th ally down, along with Conker the Squirrel after that.
You know, that's fair. That's fair.
I don't think we'll ever see them cross over other than like Smash Bros.
Well, I don't think we'll ever see Conker again, like, ever.
No, remember they made Young Conker, dude?
Young Conker, yeah, and that was probably the final nail in the coffin.
There was a character not named Redneck Kong, also known as Hillbilly Kong, that would have been in Donkey Kong Pilot, the canceled game.
This is gotta be more evidence that this family tree is a circle, if I see this guy.
I don't know, you tell me.
Oh my god, dude.
What is going on with my camera now?
What the hell is happening?
This is a pretty short podcast, but it's okay.
Pretty short? Where are you smoking?
50 minutes in, dude. So, did we drive any of you guys insane yet with our cool theories of games that are connected somehow? I don't know why I sat there waiting for like a response. I don't know.
Like the comments are just gonna yell.
Yeah.
Like, boo!
I expected you to say something. I don't know.
Do you want me to start booing? Boo!
No.
Okay.
Please no. Anyways, thanks so much for all of our patrons who supported our channel. If you guys want to help our channel out, Patreon's a great way to support us doing these shows, especially the podcast section. This is a section that we kind of go back and forth. Like, do we keep doing this? Do we not? Like, does it work well? And I think the support on Patreon is kind of like the most direct way to be like, yo, hey, we like the podcast type section at the end of the videos. If you want to watch more of our videos, make sure you subscribe with notifications on. Use code RocketSloth on GamerSupps. Stock up. Helps us out also directly. Alrighty. Well, thanks everyone. God bless America, and we'll see you guys next time with a new video.